by mistake. Nah, you didn't. But here's what I've been thinking about. I've been trying to go back to the Spitfire project and think of all the little details. And it was really the first time that I spent the kind of time making little manifold plugs and making little molds for things, scoops, blisters, things like that. And when you decide, you make the commitment to go with a semi-scale model, one of the things you need to, at some point in time, really figure out if you want to spend the time. Say, for instance, on the Seafire, you have this little defining detail. That might be a week's work. Things like this little nose scoop, or on the original one that Joe made, the radiators that we made, a couple of weeks of work, we never even used them. Things like the cannons, some of the various little ducting, the landing gear details, the spinner, the carbon spinner we made, the composite spinner, the 5-bladed prop, the cannons. And so what it is at some point in time in the construction of the model, and in our case, it's today. You have to kind of decide which of the details you want to use, and which ones you want to just say, well, we could live without that. Obviously, one of the things that we've already done, cockpit detailing. Well, you have to kind of draw a line how much detailing you want to put in here, unless you have unlimited time, which we don't. Now, let's say, for instance, just as an example, if we were modeling Dreadnought, we could just leave this piece out or paint it on or simulate it somehow. But of course, the most convincing way is when you go and make the detail either in a way that you can reproduce, or a way that each time you do it you have to make it over and over again. In our case, we're going to try to mold as many of the little details as possible. And one of the things, and I don't know if we're going to get to do it in the real near future, the exhausts, that's one of the things that I certainly am not going to leave off, and I will make a mold for that. Here's a simple reason. You try to carve this up with balsa wood, yeah, you can do it, but it's real time consuming. And as soon as you have it, your best friend says, hey, could you make me a set? Forget it, we'll make a mold. And I know Paul Winter is just waiting, drooling at the mouth here for his to put on Tsunami. Again, one of the things I've considered for a future model is having this piece of the canopy come off and then taking my cockpit details out through the top. We have another thing that we're going to be, the air inlets are like for a NASCAR scoop. Very, very, and I only have 1 or 2 pictures of exactly what that looks like. And on Miss Ashley, up on the top, there's a similar scoop, not exactly the same. But those are things I want to try to make a mold for. Now, the reason for making a mold, one of the things I'm going to be able to do with that is mold apart and just snap it right into the wooden body. And then when I put the one in the carbon body, it'll be an exact match. I won't have 1 egg and 1 orange, or 1 apple and 1 tomato. It'll keep it symmetrical. Also, for the other people building Miss Ashley, or that eventually will build it, they can order a set of these little scoops and little doodads, and, use as many of them as you like. Don't use any of them. By the way, this would be, I hope Banjock is looking at this video, this would be a great paint job for his P-51. And this was highly detailed in the book Fly Low, Fly Fast. Again, old Dago Red. Now this will be a good picture. We can get a look at several of the details. The little drop door that goes down behind the scoop. The little doors around the tail wheel. Again, we're going to look at, and whatever landing gear deal, we're going to look at how many of these is it possible that we can really include in and still have this model, ready for the flying season. By the way, our collection of art for the Spitfire bedroom is growing on a daily basis. I've had to move everything around, move the pictures, and again, thanks to everybody that contributed little mementos to that room. Of course, anybody from the world of modeling that stays at the house, you don't have to stay in Karen's doll room, you can stay in a Spitfire bedroom. Now I'm trying to decide, there's several choices on a lot of these details. Because the Miss Ashley has a Griffin engine, it doesn't have the exact stacks that a Merlin would have. You notice some of the P-51s droop down at about a 20-degree angle. They have a bend in them. The later ones don't have any bend at all hardly. They exhaust one right onto the other. So we need to think about that. That's coming up in the near future. And what we're going to try to do is things like the exhaust manifolds, do it on a day when our carbon fiber is sitting in the oven post-curing, or we have a day in between things. Any day we have in between things, I want to consider details. And by looking around, I mean, there's a world of detailing. You just have to pick and choose the ones that you really are committed to putting on a model. Now, even though we did a simplified version of this seat, if you really wanted to go crazy and make up seat belts and latches, and nice to have the documentation, nice to have the choices too. We're going to start putting aside all of the drawings we have that show the actual exhaust, because we're going to be doing that in the next week or so. The Allison engine one, we could even use the Spitfire mold. The only problem is the mold's worn out. Now early on, and this is one of the problems, when I made this original mold, and I really was struggling with learning how to do this, you go back at those Spitfire videos and get a good laugh struggling along, I never realized some of the criteria for making up a really nice mold. Well, now it's almost, when I look at this, I'm thinking, wow, why didn't I have the video back then? You can see how on some of there's so many variations of this. These kind of droop down, some of them don't droop down at all. Again, I'm going to put all of these pictures in one pile. It's the easiest way to do this. Now here's a really good picture. Just remember, there's two exhaust valves exhausting into one chamber and then into a pipe. And some of these, because they're so different, actually when we were in England I could have picked one of these up and put it in my pocket. But I want to mold the ones that are very similar to the Miss Ashley, which I assume the Griffin has larger than the Merlin. Just going to make that assumption until I see some in print. So with that thought in mind, thinking about all the detailings on Miss Ashley, I guess it'd be a good time to get down and go in the shop and get busy. First things I want to do, I want to address this little area here. I want to cover the cockpit with tape, because while one thing is drying, I can be working on something else. And I want to block sand in all, get these edges made. And this is not a radius. This is not a real radius here. This is kind of a defined edge. So I want to carry that defined edge around. I want to make sure I don't have this twisted or crooked in some way. Kind of like the idea that those little the way that the little details came out. You can see the little sparkling on the floorboard, the little yoke, the stick. For a real, what I'll call a quick and dirty job that didn't take a lot of time, I think that's really nice. Anyway, I want to get the next step, just get this covered with masking tape right up to within about a 1/64 of an inch of where we're going to sand. Then what happens, each time you work on this and sand it, you can move that tape up just a little bit, move it up a little bit so you get a blend right in. You don't wind up when you do the final finishing, you have a step there. One of the things I try to do in the beginning of every building season is take all last year's tape, find somebody in a club that's, you know, putting kids through college or whatever, and give it to them. Because what will happen at this point in time when you start using up tape 2 and 3 years old, the older tape gets stickier and stickier and stickier, and you wind up that part of your substrate or finish, or in this case something that I don't want to pull up, may come up. That word may, in my case, means always. Anyway, now I want to just leave a little bit of a gap here. I want to have a little bit of an edge to work off. Make sure it's straight. By the way, it's always easier, at least it's easier for me, to outline everything with 1/8 inch tape. And once I have an outline, then just fill it in with the green tape. By the way, the green tape is excellent. That's the latest product from 3M. Not using up any of last year's tape. Now the most important thing here is to get the first edge, right around the edge, dead equal, because this will be the defining line in the paint. Press that down real good. Now I can just cover this whole thing with the green tape. Now always leave plenty of an overlap between the tape. That's the best trick there. Get all the edges pressed down. I want to select some of the rubber polywogs. Let's see. I think we have one in here that's almost exactly the right angle. As I said, I don't think we have the one that we need right here, but I know where it is. Sure, I have it. Should have checked this before I started the camera rolling. Anyway, here it is. This is the one that gets real thin at the end, and this one that comes to a point. These up close so you can get an idea. So between using both of these with some sticky back sandpaper, I can get right in that edge where I want to work. I want to work that edge nice and smooth now, right around the canopy. Trick here with the sticky back paper, just using up scraps of paper, you can get an edge. You want to keep one, so see I'll trim this extra off. Once this edge wears out, just move it over a 1/16 of an inch, wear that edge out, move it over, wear that. You don't want to just grind away at one edge for the whole amount of time. By the way, I finally found the one I was really looking for. Sorry I'm blaming everybody. See what's nice about being old? You forget that you forget. Anyway, these polywogs are really handy. Just one of those deals that really, to me is very time consuming. Getting that edge perfect in the final finish, and then getting the blend where it blends up into the canopy, and you can't, when you run your hand over it, you can't feel where the canopy begins and ends. But I would not want to do this without the tape in place. That just would get to be really high risk at best. Now one thing nice, the polywogs do make a nice cut, but you've got to maintain the angle. What happens if you just grind down in one angle, you make a ditch. So you want to start by doing this, and as you're coming around, see how that's moving down? Start, move it down. Start, move it down. If you just keep going in the same spot over and over again, it's a real problem, and you'll make a ditch. Whoops. Let's see if we can. Now you can see at some point in time, see that's what the idea of the tape, you start to wear away the edge of the tape, and see now I can see a couple little low spots I need to fill in. But I'm getting that blend. When I can remember doing this for hours on that Spitfire to get that canopy just perfect. One of the little details, no matter, and this video basically is about detailing. Without details, geez. A real difficult blend to get from the, because this is sticking up just a little bit higher than a balsa. Now if you were to go and sand this way, you're going to wind up taking away all the balsa wood, because this is harder than a balsa wood. So what I try to do, I hope this makes sense to you, is just sand the hard part. We may have to put a little air epoxy in here because I see I've sanded a little bit too much. But I just want to get it that I have the minimum amount of, I don't want to have that step there. Now after getting as much of this sanded as possible, I took some thick CA on a Q-tip and went around the whole thing. Now you don't want to use thin and get up under the tape, but thick will just leave a nice edge there. Just paint it on with a Q-tip. You can see where it actually ends here. And now I'm sanding hard to hard instead of hard to soft. Once I get as much of this blend as I can, if I need to, I can put a little shot of air epoxy over the top just to get that perfect blend in. Now after a lot of sanding and blending, I still have a little, and let me just show this, a little low spot here. Now if I keep sanding, what's going to happen? I can flatten this out, but this is going to get paper thin and I don't want that either. And if you can see, let me just put a bridge across this. You can see I need to fill in right around here. So I'm going to mix up some air epoxy light, get me a brand new little trowel, and just trowel in just a little bit, and that'll prevent me from getting this shell way too thin. is the first thing, the first little tip on this whole thing. Anytime you're going to do this kind of a really fine feather edge, you need a new one of these. After you use them for a while, they're okay for other things, but you don't have that fine feather edge. They just to lay that, see what we're going to wind up with. Let's pretend this is the low spot here. Well, we're going to bridge this. Now it just has just the right amount of flex in it, and I want to just get one thin, paper thin layer on there. So that my first tip is start with a brand new one. And they're not that expensive, and then use them on some other project. Obviously, we want to open up a fresh pack of Aeropoxy Light. And I want to do this with grain weights. I already weighed the piece of paper, piece of cardboard. I want to get a real accurate 2-to-1. The mix ratio is 2-to-1. And since we're making another dedicated video for this, for the Aeropoxy, I won't belabor this. I won't go into a lot of details. There'll be a new video released real soon with all the fillet tricks and everything. But 2-to-1 mix. Sometimes you need to stir this up real good. And what I do, I measured out 4 grams, and I want to measure out 2 grams, but I want this to be thoroughly stirred. I don't want to take it all off the bottom or all off the top. This my little package here has been sitting on the shelf for a while. Again, that's one of the tricks of getting Aeropoxy Light to really feather out nice. You need to get the ratio exactly right at 2-to-1 by weight. And get it mixed up real good. What I did is I set the scale with the amount I need to go, and in this case it's 2 grams. Now remember the other thing, the smaller of an amount you mix, the more accurate this has to be. So rather than even mix them together, I'm going to put them on the scale. Now let's just see if that's, oh, a little bit more. Remember, it's by weight, not by volume. And you just can't take a, you know, a spoon and do this. Now if I put too much, you never want to use the same little stick in the hardener. Okay, now that's coming up a little bit less. Okay, right on the money. Once I know I have the right weights, now this part of it, the mixing part, one of the only things I've ever seen that can be a problem with Aeropoxy is if you don't mix it enough. So you want to get the color uniform, and once you see the color is uniform, look at your watch and mix it for an extra 2 minutes. See, now if you dig down in here, you'll see that it all isn't mixed down at the bottom. And it gets very, very flexible once it's mixed together. And just mix it 2 extra minutes. When you think this is done, look at the consistency. When you think it's done, give it an extra 2 minutes. It's completely mixed. You can do this old trick. You can take a hairdryer on a low setting, a real good trick by the way. Just take a little bit of the mixture, not a lot now. You can turn it into a very liquidy. See how liquidy it gets? Because we're going to try to put on, now you don't need it liquidy like this for a fillet. You need it thin like this so you can trowel on. Get that away. Just get that last little bit up there. Because what we want, the reason we want it thin like that is so we can feather edge it in. Now I've got one side. Now it takes just 1 second. Let's clean this off of this side because I need the other side of the trowel. As long as I have the heat available and a little extra, I can start to build that little fillet in there. Just paper thin. Low heat only, not high heat. Any of this extra that's on here, we could just, this sands just like balsa wood when it's dry. Now, I have a little bit here. Again, it doesn't even matter if you leave a little extra on. Again, because it does sand relatively easily. Another reason you need the tape on the canopy. Now here's another tip. The manufacturer specifies 24-hour cure time at 72 degrees, but since I keep the shop here about 62, I have two choices. I can hang this up by a heating vent or just let it dry another 24 hours. It's 24-hour cure time. 48 hours if it's going to be less, I would suggest less than 72 degrees in your shop environment. Now another one of the detailed defining features of Miss Ashley is this filleting that goes on behind the tail. I've got several photos thanks to Fred Cronwet, and I'm going to, while my Aeropoxy light is just drying up, I'm going to try to carve these out of some scrap balsa. Again, it's a very unique feature of this aeroplane, and it seems to start around the hinge line and work its way forward of even the vertical fin. Now my F-16 had some similar filleting, Lou Dutka's F-16. Notice how the flap fillet goes all the way to the back. And this was carved from one block of wood and then hollowed out, of course. Anyway, Miss Ashley has some unique filleting, and it's one of the defining features. Without that feature, if we skip it, I don't know, I think we miss kind of the fun of doing a semi-scale plane. And if you think this guy is a leftover hippie here, this is 1984, my friend. 1984 with the long hair and the beard, and no, I didn't inhale and I didn't smoke pot and I don't do any drugs or anything. I just loved model planes my whole life. A photo of that 84 plane, the fancy filleting, and oh, talk about a cockpit detail job. Wow. Alright, first thing is let me go get a chunk of scrap balsa and start laying this out. This is roughly going to occupy the area the stab will slide in here, from roughly the hinge line, maybe a little bit further back. Maybe, and I'm looking at the scale drawing here to try to get an estimate on that, how big that piece really is. I'm just trying to, I have a piece of scrap here. This was actually the piece left over from the Spitfire leading edge. That happens to be real nice light balsa. I'm just trying to estimate now. I'll need a bigger piece. I always try to use up some of the scrap. I always have some pieces that are like this that are really punk wood so that I can really fit that in. And I'm just trying to get some idea. It's way oversized anyway. Way too big. It's going to have to be smaller. And if I connect the dots, just roughly, obviously I'll put a copy of this piece on the plan. Now it looks like I'm going to need at least 1/2 inch wood to make that transition. Okay, so I have a rough piece. I'm going to cut this out of 1/2 inch wood, make 2 of them, and then we'll start carving away. Carving it at a 1/2 inch, that didn't work because what happens is with the curve, see what happens is that from the top view, this has to have a curve in it, so it's actually almost double the thickness. And then from the side view, what I did, I just basically gave up after making about 6 of these that looked totally wrong. And I started with a 1-inch block, and I'm basically going to just little by little work my way in. I was able to get this curve with the end wheel of the belt sander just so I could do a little test fit. But what it is, this part is a lot harder to do than you think. It tapers in both dimensions. So of course it's one of the things that you just got to live with it. Doing a complex shape like this, here's where you can really use glue-on sandpaper. This really makes it easy to get this part of the shape. Now, you may look at this part and say, oh, I could carve that. Yeah, try doing it. This is one of those things that looks a lot easier than it really is. Now, I roughed out this piece, and it turned it into like a half hollow deal, so that I could get this to rub right on there and put in that final impression, that final outline. And that's really difficult to do if you don't have this technique. And this was one of the things, I don't remember who, somebody shared it in Stunt News as a way of installing a canopy. It's an excellent way to do it. Here's one of the problems you run into all the time here, is you want to get this part, and I won't press that sandpaper, but the problem is there's no way to hold it. You draw to hold it and you wind up sliding off. Now, one of the ways that's real convenient with old sticky back paper, put the sandpaper part down, okay? Get it approximately in the position you think it's going to wind up in. And now this lets you get half of that angle in one stroke of the pen. See how nice that goes in? Now, I would be willing to bet that by the time this is done, I'm going to carve 8 or 10 of these up and have a whole slew of them before I get one that I'm happy with. But it is one of the defining features. And it's one of the things, you know, if you're going to have a Bearcat, it's got to have a big 4-bladed prop or whatever. You know, every plane has a defining feature of something that really needs to have. Now, once that gets that angle in there, and that is a good tip, by the way. That's nice. Now, once we get this angle in here, I almost don't know. It's only going to go one way. Now I can, with this in position, see, roughly in the position, now I can get the flat on this, and that's going to take a little bit of this curve off. This is your point of convergence right here. I know, for instance, that I need to take the material off the top. Once I carve this shape into the convergence, then I can take the rest of this material off the side, and I can carve this in. And it'll probably only take me about 10 hours to get this to where I'm happy with it. These are the little things that matter, though. When it's all said and done, you'll line up 20 planes all in a row, and one of them has the details. Now, the real joy here is going to be hollowing this out. And even that isn't anywhere near as challenging as making the mirror image part. Now, what I'm trying to do is connect the 2 dots to get the final shape on here. Connect the 2 points with the top of the fuselage side. Now, what I can do, take off the sticky back paper. This is a little more complicated than I thought it was going to be, but again, anything worth having is going to be a challenge. Now I got to decide how far forward that's going to go. And you know what I'll do is I'll just wait until I get the other piece made. This isn't really scale. A real scale one would come underneath here. It's just no way is that going to work on what I hope will be a real competition stunt plane. But that looks like it's close. Now, to make the mirror image, well, obviously I'll start with a 1-inch block and go step by step by step. Just really want to see if I'm going to be able to replicate this on the other side. This all looks so easy. It really isn't, believe me. Now, so the first thing I'll do is get a piece of 1-inch. I cut this out of 1-inch wood, make a new pattern up, of course. Get this cut out of 1-inch wood. Then what I can do is I can trace one of the angles on it. I can get one traced. The other one I have to kind of do freehand. Okay, now to make a mirror image of this, you would think it's a lot easier than it is. It isn't really that easy, because the wide part we want to get going this way. So from the top, it's going to need to go that way. Now, the only problem is on a mirror image, you see how the curve goes? So that's not correct. So we want to trace this with the part going this way. So in other words, from this line forward, I want to take out on the belt sander a half moon in this dimension. I just want to kerf this away, and I can do that on a belt sander real quick. And that just roughly gets me this cut here without doing a lot of hand cutting. Dimension we want to have on the kerf. We want to take that corner off. Whoa! See, I'm trying to look at the camera while I'm doing this. Okay. You would think I'd edit stuff like that out. Nah. Roughly how we get that half moon cut in there. Now I can just cut this off on the saw. Right, thinking, why doesn't he just edit that out? No way, Jose. Okay, now we can trace that piece. Let me go get the pattern. Trace that right on there. Remember here, this is a mirror image. In other words, you can't have one part on one side. Each side has an individual curve to it. We have to go back to the model, carve these points in, and I can do that freehand, and then I can get my final set on the side with the sandpaper on the other side of the fuselage. Always handy to have the mirror image part next to you. Excuse me. So that I can look at this, knowing that this is the part that goes on this side. Well, see, I had it backwards. Okay, now I know this has to come in this way, just to rough this, and this has to come in this way. And now I can actually take this one and lay it on top of this one and eyeball up which is the... In other words, I'll always take the bigger of the two and make it smaller till it matches the smaller of the two. Okay, now we got the two pieces roughed out. Now the second thing is to try and see if they're symmetrical. Well, obviously one of the things we can do is put one up against the other and make the bigger one down to the size of the smaller one. That's one thing. Actually we're pretty close. But this is the bigger of the two, and I'll just take a little bit of this off. Now what I did, to make this a little bit more rigid, because I'm going to carve some of this away, I sealed the outside of it with thick CA and sanded it back down, just to harden up the shell, because once that's in place, that's really going to get difficult. It's going to get almost impossible to get a nice sanding on that, and we also have to cut it to make the parting line so that when the tail comes off, half of this is going to come off and half stay on the body. The next thing is I want to get these as symmetrical as possible. I'll go over to the sanding bench and just go back and forth until I get these. Actually, see, the one is just that much bigger. Now, as you take this curve out, the part gets smaller and smaller in all dimensions. In other words, it just starts fading into the fuselage. So at some point in time, it's going to be exactly the same size as the other part. So I'll sand for a minute or two and then do a check. Sand a minute, do a check. Because if I make this one too small, then I got to go reverse this and then make the original one. The bigger one always has to become the size of the smaller one. A little wizard is one of the handy features of the wizard for doing little hollowing jobs like this. And I want to get every bit of weight out back here. Now I try to decide if I wanted to tack glue these on and then split them, because it's going to be right through the joint where the tail section comes off that I need to do these. So I guess the next step is to get these tacked into position. Little Wizard, what a nice little tool. Last little bit, a nice way to get this is just take a Bud McKnight sanding stick, nail file, whatever, cut it right in half, and with that curve will help hollow this out. I want to turn this into a pistachio shell. Every little bit of weight I can get out of here will be a big help. Now, if we had more molding experience, I would have tried to carve these into the plug and molded these right in place, but because I'm new at this and just learning the ropes, I didn't want to make it too complicated, but that looks like it's hollowed out pretty well. Got a little birch bark canoe. Canoe for a cockroach. Okay, now the next thing is, I guess, taking some of the Hobby Lobby pins. I can get these pinned in position just to get a look at if they're straight and symmetrical. Boy, this was a lot of work cutting and hollowing these out. Total grain weight, 1/3 of a grain. Now this will end tonight with, in fact we're at the end of the night right now. Just going to tack glue these in position. When I come back down tomorrow, I'm going to have to make that cut and make it real accurate. Again, just one of the details. Now, if we were making a scale model, these would be much longer, but the tail would be much smaller. So everything has to be interpolated here. But I think those are going to work. And what I'll do, obviously, tack them on, check from the front that I don't have them crooked. And I'm lining them both up with just above the block separation line. All right, see you tomorrow. And our aero epoxy light will be hardened up tomorrow. It's still a little tacky. Starting to really shape up. They were really coming down a home stretch here, and the detailing really does add a nice dimension to it. Now today, one of the things I want to do, I want to start by getting this cut right in here, so obviously so this can come apart. Now I'm trying to figure out, see, this is the kind of thing, when you do about 10 of these take apart planes, you figure this out. I'm wondering if I can cut right down through there. Maybe if I had a thin razor blade I could do that. Now believe me, this is one of the things I've been trying to find. I took the thinnest razor blade. This is a Panasonic razor blade, and it's going right in the groove. I'm not sure I can even do it this way. I'd like to get this. Obviously what I'm looking for here is that it's dead accurate. See, this is not working. Okay, so we learned one thing, not to go all the way, because the razor's walking this way. And what I may have to do is put 64th plywood caps on the joints. See how the razor is walking this way? And like anything, because this is my first real effort at making a truly take-apart plane, well, this is one of the things we're going to have to figure out. Looks like we're going to have some 64th plywood. See, once I get that cut, now obviously what I could have done is cut it ahead of time and then glue it. No, but I wanted it glued in one piece, and I know when I bolt this back together it'll line up perfectly then. Yeah, this is just going to take a little eyeball, and I can see that. But again, all these little details, boy, when you add them up. Okay, now I just got to remove this back section of the fuselage and then see if I can get nice hard edges on that. Took these edges and just hardened them up with thin CA for the temporary. until I can get a hard edge on here, and then ran some thin CA down inside to harden up that joint. Because I know for sure when people launch the plane, this is going to be very vulnerable, so I wanted to harden that corner. Run some thin CA down inside and outside both. I want to get these edges relatively smooth. Maybe I don't even need the plywood there, as long as I can get a nice joint. But again, I know how vulnerable this is on a vulnerable part of the plane right there. Anyway, that something that looks like it takes a half an hour can wind up taking a long time. Like I said before, one of the things I'm finding out, and I really haven't been able to decide, the extra effort it takes to make a take-apart plane, is it balanced by the fact that, like little parts like this, you can sand in your bare hands. I mean, this is so convenient to never have to deal with the wing and the tail and you can get perfectly smooth edges on things that normally you wouldn't have a chance on. Just being able to hold the little pieces right up to the point. Now, even when we're buffing this out, remember, we'll be able to buff these little parts out without having to deal with the whole airplane. So maybe that'll, I don't know, eventually balance all that. Now I'm trying to get this edge just right, then I'm going to harden this whole piece with thin CA. Once I get it exactly how I want it, and get the fit exactly how I want it, and then once I do this, I'll get the whole piece put together, and then re-sand this edge, dress this edge off. Now this whole thing can be bolted back together. Then I can sand the whole thing as one unit to get that whole kerf in there. Little spot where I missed with the razor blade, I've just put some thin CA in there and put in just the smallest little chunk of wood. And what I'm trying to do, let's make sure that's gone off already, is sand in this dimension. You can do this on a cowl fit too, by the way, when you want to make a nice edge on a cowl fit. Obviously, same technology applies. I need to turn this around and then dress this whole edge off. And once I get the edge perfect, of course, harden everything up with thin CA. Now I can take this in, but I won't take the final little bit till I get the other half bolted in place. I can really relate to. I used to have a cowling like this, and I'd put this in place. Let's just say this was the scoop or some paraphernalia with it. And then I'd run thin CA on the whole thing, and without realizing I had just glued the cowling in place. So before I harden all these final edges up, let me suggest you harden them separately and then just only join them after the CA has totally kicked off. Anyway, that looks like we have a real nice joint there now. Now there's a trap you can fall into when you're doing this kind of thing. If one part, see this part is relatively soft. If I press down hard with the sanding block, let's do the other side, I think it's even softer. You see what'll happen is, one side will press in harder than the other. So I really want to, until I get dope and tissue and everything on this, I really want to cut this edge, and this is where that sanding block with the edge cut back. Let me show this. This is really one of the things when you're getting into a fillet, to have that cut back as opposed to just being flat. And what that does, it lets you work your way right up, when you get the light right up into that fillet. Now while the two pieces are in position, I can dress off all of these little angles and edges. Now what I always find is I come back down to shop the next day after doing a little detail like this, and I try to look at the photographs and say, gee, how does that look? Well, and I'm always a little disappointed because I'm always wanting to make things more scale, more scale, more scale. But the problem is there's a point at which then the plane just becomes either not realistic as a, you know, a full stunt ship. You just get into the Never Never land of, I call it winter dreams, things that in the middle of the winter look okay, and then when you go to fly the plane in the spring or the summer, you say, why did I design that cowling that I can't choke the engine, or that finish with 30 extra coats of clear? Okay, now I'm going to pull this apart and harden all this wood up and put this all back together, and that'll be the end of that little detail. Yeah, you kind of have to look at it from a lot of different angles just to get it that you're really, really happy with it. I don't know, I think that's going to work real well. Now, next thing I want to do, I want to sand out the Aeropoxy light is dry. I want to sand out all the little extra detailing on that Aeropoxy light. Now, some tips for dealing with Aeropoxy light. If you find when you sand it that it's not powdering off similar to Brodak Dope or Brodak Primer, two possibilities. It's not totally cured, let it cure another day, especially if the temperature is cold, if shop conditions are cold. If it's not coming off like powder, see the way it's coming off like powder? Well, I had this up by the heating vent, so that'll take care of that. But if not, it's not a problem. Just wait another day or put it where it's warmer. Remember, any epoxy cures, and you want it to come off like powder. Now, some of the replacement materials used to come off like chewing gum. We know that. This is not one of them, though. Another trick, you always want to sand this. I don't know if you can see. It doesn't say on this, but this is 220 sandpaper. You never want to use like 600 or 400 or even 320. Because what you want to do is, in the final sanding, you want to leave a tooth. You want scratches in there so that whatever primer or dope the first coat goes in, you get that tooth. If you sand it perfectly smooth, it's like a piece of Teflon. That first coat of dope or paint or primer goes on, and it just peels off like saran wrap, or you wind up getting bubbles. So, my thought is, a suggestion is never use less than 220 sandpaper. Move it constantly. Now, especially in that tight little fillet, we want to get right in there. And it's always better, in the case of any material like this, to do several thin coats, not to trowel on a big spoonful and then have to sand it off. Now, what's nice is because we have the fuselage already fiberglassed here, we're going from hard to hard, and in a matter of a minute or so, the sanding is done. Little tip, and I know I've put similar tips. You see how the sandpaper wears out? Whenever you use a sanding block, what happens is you wear out that edge. Well, what I do then, wear out that edge. Now, obviously, this is real easy to figure out. Now, for all purposes, I'm not wasting any sandpaper now. In my case, you know, I just don't like to waste things. When you grow up poor, you learn not to waste things even if you don't have to. And I've got a brand new piece. Now, in the case of if we were using this edge, I would just keep moving this over and over and over and over and over. So you're only wearing out one edge when you use a sanding block. And I think the biggest thing you can pick up from any videos is how people that are artisans or craftsmen or whatever, how they take advantage of this. Otherwise, you're just wasting things. There's no reason to. This is the only part of that piece of sandpaper that's even close to being worn out. And that is a good tip. You can use that over and over again. The thing, if you use a sanding block and you leave the sandpaper on the sanding block, what it does, it tends to hold that sandpaper in position. You never want to take that original piece of sand, wear it out, and then use it with that piece of sandpaper on there. And boy, thanks to Bob Martens, he made these years ago. You can see how much wear and tear these have. Done many airplanes with these. And that back cut is part of the secret. Back cut edges and less of a back cut, just made out of 1/4 inch ordinary plywood. A great tool. These were made by Bob Martens a long time ago. Now this is one of the tricky areas. What happens is the tape is higher than the canopy area below it, and we want to make a blend. So what's real important is not to go out over the tape too much. And the air epoxy, because it sands very easily, it sands not a whole lot different than balsa, what happens is you're tempted to just sand right through it. Now there was that little uneven spot there. I don't want to sand off the edge of the tape, because at the end of this I'm going to peel up the tape and then just kiss that line and put new tape. I've pretty much worn that edge out. Trying not to go up and sand out the tape. I want to get a real thin blend. But there is nothing that I think is nicer than when you're all done, you go to rub your hand over this and we'll fill that little gap in with clear, and you say, oh, it's like it's all one piece. It isn't chunk, 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 chunk. Don't you like that word? Anyway, it's really nice how you can sculpt this material. Boy, and I remember other materials, mentioning no names, other materials, I thought I had died and gone to chewing gum heaven. This is so pleasant. And it just powders right off. Oh, I love it. But I want to sculpt that and get that right in that corner. See, it's just a question at this point now of being fussier and fussier. I like to get one even line right around. Remember, this is not a radius. The corner of that sanding block, it right around the edge. At this point, it's really starting to feel real nice now. I like to do everything at the end of it with this spot right there. Your hand is always a better indicator of where high and low spots are. Even want to give this one more coat of thin CA. You got to be careful not to press hard. As soon as that starts kicking off, you're done. But by hardening this up, it'll protect me from the Rolex watch band of people that always seem to wind up launching your plane at big contests, and I'm one of them. It's really funny. You get home from the Nats and there's dents you never knew you had. Anyway, here's another really good tip, is where a piece ends like this. See, the most important thing is to harden this edge up. And to get this transition, where this blends in, I want it to be a perfect blend. Well, I need to go hard to hard, not hard to soft, because I want to keep those sharp angles just like the prototype has. What's the trick? Never use kicker. Just let it kick on its own, then lightly sand it down with a block. Now in today's mail, oh man, from Ken Clapson, two that I don't have in my collection. 95 and 94 Skyfires. Oh man. Now we're getting close to having, let's see what years we need. I'm going to have to make a list up of which ones. Skyfire's stuff starts at, and believe me, if you want to buy somebody a really great Christmas present, something like this. Now by the time you get this, I'm going to be closing in on having a full collection. They're also doing a video of Gary Levitz's life that's not for sale yet. I have some of these train ones. These are great. Anyway, I'm looking up. Look at this. They have a Grand Slam for $324. You can get all the Reno Air Race videos. I should have bought that right in the beginning. Anyway, these have been donated by Ken Clapson. We're glad to loan out a copy, share them, but obviously we're not going to turn their business into a rent-a-video thing. Just like to share them with everybody, and please look at some of these. I mean, these are really great tapes. These are just perfect. But here's the greatest thing away. You got an 800 number to order them from. The greatest thing is watching them and playing them in the shop over and over and over and over. I can't tell you, I have worn out the one of Tsunami, the last flight of Tsunami. For all purposes, I ought to go buy a new copy. It's all full of white dropouts from wearing it out. We play it at least once a day in the shop for the last 4 years. Some great footage on here. Wow. Hey, and if you really want to borrow a copy of these tapes and enjoy the Reno air races, please,
he turned in a respectable
please give me a call.
393 miles per hour.
Gary Levitz is on a lot of these tapes. Hey, I get a kick out of this. They're using Gorhams to buff out the plane.
A little less than pleased with
This is Gary Levitz here, by the way. We're going to have the video of his life soon as Skyfire releases it.
Pretty good. Just didn't have the time to
Anyway, he went on to get killed in Miss Ashley, of course.
We didn't fly at all on Monday because of Bill.
I don't know how you could not want to build a semi-scale plane after watching these videos.
Now this right there was the fastest the Dago Red had ever flown. 458 miles per hour with David Price at the throttle.
Kent Tyser, eat your heart out, Dago Red. What footage. Makes me want to build more and more. This is terrible. I'm trying to watch these new Reno videos, and obviously what I did is I stuck my fingernail into the most tender part of the rudder, but not to worry. One of the things I'm going to do over and over in the course of this whole video, and I may as well do it on video again, once you make a little damaged spot, redo the whole front edge. And number two, clip your fingernails. Now I keep that fingernail clipper right in the shop, right where I can use it. I don't know what happens. Anytime I start finishing a plane, my fingernails grow at 4 times the length they normally should grow. But keeping these edges hard, I'm getting paranoid already about people launching this plane. I don't know why. It's going to be like launching a porcupine. Yeah, I can just picture. You know that's going to happen. Well, be a subject for a nice repair video. Probably the single best tip you can get. Every tip is the single best one. Why do I say that? Anyway, there's a lot of footage of Gary Levitz on this. Gary Levitz apparently had a very colorful life, which I really can't wait to get the video. And thanks to everybody that's been contributing these videos. I just realized we're closing in on having all of them. We need, what do we need? We need 93 yet. 93, 96, and 97, and we'll have them all. But anytime I need a little inspiration, there's days I get lazy and say, I don't want to work so hard today. I don't want to stay up past midnight or get up early. The easiest thing to do, pop one of those videos on. All of a sudden you want to build a Bearcat. It's unbelievable. I'm excited to hear that Billy Werwidge is making real progress on his Bearcat. We will really have a Nationals to never forget. Anyway, this piece, we're going to put this away now for a while. One more detail in the bank. Now another little detail that I've done on many models, including the Red Baron, is these little exhaust manifolds. These just happen to be not too prototypical. And we've done them in several different styles. Here's some that are a lot more realistic. Al Rabe's they look great, in fact. These are the swing down versions. Have the little cover on top. You have the direct sweep back and the sweep down. 2 versions of these. Not a real Miss Ashley because it's a Griffin. They sweep directly back. Now usually one of the advantages of having molding a set like that is pretty easy. You only need to make 1 mold and you can just reverse it for the other side. If they sweep down, you need to make 2 molds. Now up in the Spitfire bedroom, the I-beam plane has the Siamese. We still have that mold. The original Spitfire has, well, a little different variation. These don't look as, because of this plate, they just don't have the same realistic look as, say, the Seafire. To me, the Seafire is the most realistic. It has that little cover on top, which simulates the valve covers of the Griffin. Really really do have plenty of choices here, and let's pull out some of the little leftover mold parts we have and see if we can come up with something. And always having documentation. This is Warren Walker's poster that he sent me, and it has some real nice detail shots of the exhaust manifold. So a lot of variations, but we're going to try to replicate the ones that actually are on Miss Ashley. That's going to be my first choice. I just love having a Spitfire bedroom. Back down the shop. Stop dreaming, Arnowski. Down there and go to work. What I always do is in my drawer of molded parts, see this one has a molding flaw up here, I save all the throwaways. Basically these are ones that need some repair. I was laminating in a piece of carbon fiber. Had no idea if I'd ever use these, but one of the things, what happens, these came from this mold, what happens is you can see eventually, because we didn't know to use the right release agent, in fact in a lot of these cases we didn't use any release agent, and what happened to mold after 30 or 40, usually 30 is a safe number, it'd just self-destruct. And this was using the really cheesy 3M rubber, which is like this is like a rubber band. Well, later on we started making, I made about 200 of these. This really wore out, even though I was getting decent pulls from this. This one is still a good one. Well, you can see the mold wears out in time. You only get to make so many of them. That's why I always save the plugs. So lesson number one here is always save all of the plugs from your old stuff, because you never know when you're going to want to use it. I have a whole bag of, these are the reject parts that just need some little trimming or truing or whatever. Again, we were trying different resins. You can see some of the resins are susceptible to having air bubbles. I have casting resins that look like Budweiser beer. All kinds of little choices. But this now, this little handful of parts, it may be that I want to use these, and from looking at Ken Clapson's thing, it may be that we can kind of change the angle here, and well, you need little parts like this to work from. When I started the Spitfire project, we came up with, I don't remember, I think Bob English sent me these. Some, maybe not. Some, and these were really unrealistic. I mean, this is going back a long ways when we really were not making things as accurately as we are now. Had a little die for putting the crimps in. Trying to remember what some of these other, oh, here's another one. And you can just compare and see where this project has gone over the years. These aren't that nicely detailed at all, but what we do have, if we decide to use it, is a lot of little aluminum. These are air conditioner parts, I believe, and one of the things we have here is, the thing that's difficult to do with this tubing is bend it. You almost never get a good bend. So by having some bent parts, now we can kind of manipulate and go back and forth, and we can come up with what's going to be our little mold for this Miss Ashley too. First things I want to do is take some of these reject parts. You can see this one has a little air bubble. Change the angle on them, because the real angle of the Miss Ashley exhaust is unlike the Spitfire, is more pronounced out. They're not as long. Remember, these originally were Siamese exhausts. So we're going to just, because we have these, make a little test part and see if we like it. Now you don't see it on a video, but about 3 times I've been grinding one of the angles down and just let go of it. It goes right into the vacuum. Good thing I have a whole bag of them. See, by doing this, I can, in essence, change the angle. What happens if you take standard length parts, and these are the Siamese ones, and you try to butt to it, well, this one's broken. Nice to have all these extra parts. Anyway, what's nice, you see what happens? It's not realistic. In other words, these should be facing out. And I know from the past, if you don't leave at least a certain amount of molding rubber in between the pipes, you can just forget it. So what I did, trying to be as creative as possible, is I took one of these and changed the angle. so that this would be the original one, and just so you can see, because the angle is a critical thing. It allows one to tuck in behind the other. So from having these, now we can get rid of the standard ones, and it doesn't matter that I've used all different ones, because these will, in effect, when I glue them or attach them together. Now see, I still have to fine-tune the angles and different parts of this. But keep in mind, this is a whole lot. It's a whole lot more doable, and it's the right length now. The length is correct, as opposed to before. The thing was, was going to come out at the tail horn or the flap horn or whatever. So with this in mind, now the only thing I'm not happy about is the pieces are individually, let me lay them down this way, they're individually too long to be scale. So what I'm going to do is take 1/16 of an inch off each one to start with. In fact, I already did one here just to see. I took one and shortened it 1/16 of an inch to see if that's going to be more in keeping with the drawing or with the Miss Ashley look. Now I'm just going to make a couple of extra ones up until I can see if the length is right. Getting the length right is kind of a touch and go thing. Now it's certainly, when it's done, it looks real easy, but this part of it is a real pain. There's a couple of things that can be wrong. First off, these need to be finished inside the tubes. What'll happen if one is just a little bit crooked, or just on a slightest little bit of an angle wrong, boy, it stands out. See? Here, let me give you an example. This one is crooked. I need to get them that they all line up in a straight line, and that they also have the same angle. Because if that angle is off even by just a little bit, every one I ever mold will be wrong. Keep in mind, this is the original part I carved from a piece of balsa wood. Then I made a mold of this, made 6 of these, which in turn we made 3,000 of them. But from this one part, all of these parts, including this original, well, what's going to become the Miss Ashley mold, they all have come off of this one single plug. So it really does pay to put a lot of time into the plug. That's my point. I very seldom ever do is throw away my reject parts. Now you can see there's a lot of reject parts, and I have probably a lot more than a real mold maker would have. But I save them all. Now here's the reason. There's always going to be a time when I don't want to recarve that original part. Now that was probably 4 or 5 hours carving, polishing, sanding, getting it symmetrical. Now, because I saved all my scrap parts, I have a good nucleus for starting this little part, and now I need to line these up. That's the next thing. The next thing I want to do, I want to clean inside of each one with a Dremel bit and get them nice and smooth inside. Otherwise the molding rubber goes in there and you don't get a smooth, it just chunks when it comes out. Have to really be real careful about getting in there and cleaning that little area up. That little tiny area in there, I got my dental bit, but that little area, if it's rough and has little pit marks in it, that molding rubber doesn't even last 4 or 5 pulls. Now what I'm going to do is use Brodak primer on these and make up some kind of a little sanding tool that I can get right in there and get that cleaned out. Boy, and if you ever want to have a good laugh, the best laugh you'll ever, go back down to the Spitfire videos, making the first set of these I ever made. I was right on the verge of just jumping out a window. I was so frustrated, and all that is really funny. What's funny if you don't have to live through it. Now, once I tack glued these on, the next step, of course, is to see that they're all in, you don't have them all misaligned one way or another. And I glued them to a piece of 16th plywood. Now I want to hand finish each one with some 1200 sandpaper, and most of all fill in all these little rough spots, because I don't want any of these coming out in the final mold. And try to make sure that they're all kind of equal. I can lay a ruler across the top here, make sure I don't have a short one or a long one. Get them all evened up. And we'll be ready to put a little bit of Brodak primer on these. There's one test that works well. You can pick out if there's any high or low ones. In this case, it looks pretty reasonable anyway. We don't have one really sticking out. This one is probably 2 strokes of the sandpaper away from being right. And this one just showed it was a couple of strokes higher. Now I want to also look down before I go any further and make sure the angle is right. I don't have one. It would be pretty... It sticks out like a sore thumb when one is wrong. Just flood the base plate with thin CA and just let it kick off by itself. Get to the hard part, detailing these out with some 6 or 1200 sandpaper. And the hardest part is to get the areas inside to be nice and smooth. I usually have a way of rolling up sandpaper and doing that, but it's a little time consuming. This is why it's nice if somebody's already taken the time to make the mold. These are parts I would gladly buy from anybody, from Dave Brown or some commercial place, if they would make them in this scale that would fit stunt planes. A very labor-intensive little detailed part. Like the hardest little part to get is in between. Now I roll up sandpaper and to get in those little detailed areas. There's just no quick, easy way to do this. But I want to have a relatively smooth surface. And then I want to get a coat of Brodak primer on here and then sand that first coat of primer out. Anytime you're detailing these, the real thin Bud McKnight sanding sticks, commercially known as nail files. Whoops, that one's broken. See, I put a fold in that one. These are good for getting in little tight spots. And I'd also like to make sure, see, the first thing I did wrong with the first mold is I didn't have enough material in here. And these, when I tried to take them apart, oh. This I hope is going to be a mold because I know many people like Paul Winter are already on the waiting list for a nice set of exhaust manifolds for their Tsunami, Spitfire, whatever project they happen to be working on. Now I try to get a little ball of sandpaper to get these smoothed out. Single most important thing is that these are smooth inside. But again, once the mold is built, everybody has nice little exhaust manifolds. Even your competition. Thing I need to do is cut this off and make a base plate to mount this. Now the rest of this material I'll remove with the Dremel tool, and this will become the base of our mold. A lot of work goes into this. See, there's always little spots in here that folded up sticky back paper. Always little spots. Before I put the Brodak primer on, I want to have all this as smooth as possible. Of course, the mold looks pretty rough in this condition right now, but once we get a couple of coats of Brodak primer on here, sand it out. It'll start to look like a little spaghetti, box of spaghetti. I've seriously considered using pieces of macaroni for this in the past. I just mounted this to a piece of scrap 1/4-inch balsa. And I'll try to get at least 1 or 2 coats of Brodak primer on this tonight and let them dry. But here's the most important thing is that they kind of all line up. They kind of wind up with the same angle. And we really only have to make one mold because we're not, if these were to turn down ones, we'd have to make one for each side, but this way we only have to really make one mold. So that little plug should be ready. Yeah, a day or two we'll have parts. Now I want the first coat of primer to dry, thoroughly dry before I sand it. And then we'll be able to put I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 coats on this. Get a really nice finish on it, and then we'll lay up the mold. And it's all these little details. When you finish up a plane, and that's little details like that, boy, just makes a world of difference in the way you enjoy the modeling. I don't know. Back tomorrow and see if we can make some progress. Okay, here's some interesting photos from England. This is from Roy Cherry. Now, take a real close look at this and you think, well, what's wrong? The motor mount's on the wrong side of the plane. It's a take-apart plane. No, he takes the top off the plane, not the bottom. And the reason is, and I'm going through this one by one, he wants to leave the pipe attached to the motor during maintenance. Well, that's an interesting concept, and I'm not sure, well, I'm not sure it would. I'm positive it would work. He's got the tail done similar to an impact. Now, my only thought is if you're going to do an impact type of tail, or Casminato, or anybody that does this, that these holes should be as close to the edge as possible. The closer you can put those holes to the edge, the better of a grip you're getting, but obviously not totally necessary. Now, this is interesting. This is the top of the model. It looks like he's used that black carbon veil. A real nice heavy-duty belt crank mount, arrow shaft, and some stiffening agents, which I may find this to be a necessary thing. I don't know until we actually get to do that. That's from Roy Cherry in England. Okay, in this photo pack, and this all came from Paul Winter's Tsunami during various stages of the finishing, and I'll read his note. First coat before the clear dope, and he says, Wendy, I've been watching your videos and you're my favorite video master, checking to see that there's dust. Well, see, it's possible that even Paul could learn something. Here he's got his model with, and I'm reading right off his little note, drying in my room, and here I am sitting in bed sniffing the fumes. Okay, now here's one of the things. I don't know exactly what he's doing here. He's doing some alignment work. I just bought a bunch of these clamps, by the way. I think, oh, this is the ones with the rubber bands. Now, to show you that Paul truly has learned the craft, notice that he's drilled out the motor mounts before he built the crutch, so you know he's... Paul, I know they're very small mounting holes. It's just impossible to help this guy, believe me. Anyway, here he's got his crutch going together. He's invented a whole new way to build the fuselage. I'm reading right off his note. His stuff drying with the Brodax silver. See, these are little things he's picked up off the video. Drying with little Allen wrenches holding it. He's got the clear on the tail. Now he's got an idea here, and I'm guessing this is something he's copied or improvised from Paul Walker's Impact, these triangles, which obviously is a good way to do it. Okay, these are some of the other features of the plane, and again he's got his own little, I wanted him to take some pictures of how the English guys do their take-apart, and this looks like how they do it, of course. This looks like this is something I can use. Now, again, I don't know, because the note is sketchy. While he's putting this together with all these clamps, I don't understand what the need for clamps is, but there's more clamps. It looks like he's building a house here. Now we're talking. See, he's learned how to sand silver. Yeah, now we're getting there, Paul. And we're going to be doing this probably on the next video or so, doing all our alignment. But I guess maybe this Paul Walker thing is how I'll do it with the little triangles. certainly an okay way, and certainly Paul's plane seemed to fly like that wouldn't be one of the problems. Okay. And he's got his center line here, center line there for alignment. Then he's got this piece. Well, we're going to be doing something similar to this on the video. This is a nice shot, showing his original Sunam and the new one. Again, the take apart is exactly the same as Miss Ashley and or Cosmonato and or Paul Walker. Guess there's only so many things you can invent there. Now this I don't understand. This is possibly something different, and he's got a little fillet on the fuselage. I haven't thought about the fillets yet. This little tail piece, making it up as a separate unit. Making up all the little details, which we're going to be doing one by one by one. The real Tsunami has the valve cover blisters. Paul, it certainly looks, I choke as I say this, but I really have to give you credit. You are making progress. Just resist every bit of temptation to invent something here. And I think you'll have, this is really a nice profile for he's even got a better profile than mine. But just don't invent anything. We still love you. Now we wake up in the morning for another big day of modeling. You can tell we're going to be down in that cellar all day today. Look at these birds, which they were down in the cellar. Another big snowstorm predicted today. Oh, I don't believe it. 8 to 10 inches?
10 to 14.
10 to 14? Terrific. Means we'll get to work on a plane all day today. I love it. Now you've seen the pond in the summer and the fish. Well, this is what it looks like in the winter in New Jersey. It's like Ken Clapson's backyard. Hey, we just got a new subscriber, a new person joining us from Canada, John Hatt from Nova Scotia. I bet he knows what this snow is all about. Welcome aboard, John. This is why we always feed the birds, because this time of year there isn't a lot of stuff to forage for out here, and but a little bit of money and time it takes to feed the birds, they're all very happy. Hey, see this? What we found out just the other day, and this was funny. We had some leftover pancakes and we put them up in our bird feeder. The birds like the pancakes better than our $5 a pound fancy bird seeds. Oh, you wait and see as the day goes on. We're really supposed to get a big storm today. This is what I love about modeling. Just picture a big hot cup of coffee, a day off work, you have all your balsa wood and all your dope and your moles and everything. Ah, I love New Jersey.
You know something, in 2 seconds, if they don't come get that
They'll be, yeah, it gets buried with snow.
buried.
But just yesterday we have a new visitor to our bird feeder too. He's a big giant gray bird. I want to try to get him on video. But 3 times the size of the other birds. Look at this poor little bird on our windowsill. He's a house finch. But that snow is really coming down.
Well, you don't get 10 to 14 inches. It's just down a little bit.
Oh, I wish I lived in Anaheim. What's going on over in this?
Look how puffy he is.
Now look at, we have a pot of soup on the stove. Look at this. Breakfast galore. I just love being a modeler in New Jersey in winter. Knowing I don't have to go outside until the snow stops. And knowing I'm not a bird either. Where is he? He's hiding behind the pancakes back there. Seriously, it looks like we're going to be spending a good part of this day shoveling snow. What I want to do now, I've had 3 or 4 coats on here. Give it a half hour, an hour or so to dry, nice thin coats. I've tried to smooth out all the rough edges. And of course the next step on this, I'm going to get this just polished with a little bit of Gorham's and a Q-tip a little bit. get it as smooth as possible in every way, and then make myself the little box. The hardest part of any of this type of molding is the little pieces that go inside, because they tend not to have a nice smooth edge, and when you pull them out after a certain amount of times, they kind of deteriorate. But it looks like, after all that little handiwork, it looks like we have something that looks quite a bit like the real Miss Ashley manifold, which is pretty amazing. And there aren't many. This is Gorham's, by the way. Good old Gorham's. Gorham's and Brodak primer seem to make a surface that, at least in my experience, is real easy to get molded. Now, see, I'm just using a Q-tip, and I'm going to spend 4 or 5 minutes on each one of these stacks, because I don't want any rough areas in there. Any little rough area is going to be a problem as the mold goes on, assuming we make a usable mold. As it cycles through, the problem is the life of the mold deteriorates really rapidly, as you can see from some of those other previous molds. This surface in here really has to be perfectly smooth if you want to have a real good shot at getting 30 or more, maybe 50 pulls on the mold. Also, another thing, like in these areas in here, a Q-tip is a good way to get a little polish on that surface. And the nice thing about Brodak primer for molding purposes is it just picks up a shine, geez, just almost instantly. One of the little tricks you can use, and I've used it over and over, is to take the end of a Q-tip, cut the last little bit off, chuck it up in a little wizard or in a Dremel, and if you use a slow speed, it'll self-destruct. Obviously, it's not going to last forever, but even this you can use to get a little push. You can even use this when buffing out a plane, by the way, getting in some hard-to-get-at places. It doesn't last forever, that's for sure, but as opposed to doing it by hand, believe me, this saves a lot of time. And I know you can get better Q-tips. Now, we always buy the cheapest Q-tips in the world, but I know you can buy like real high-end ones that have plastic spouts on them. Sticks and the spouts, what am I talking about? Last thing before I make the box, I want to get a little coat of Partol wax on everything, just to impart a little more of a smooth surface. Now, when you're pulling a mold like this apart, and I've done this already, I go to pull it this way, and I've just torn the mold up. I have to be real careful that I always know the mold is going to release this way off the part. It's real important to know that. In this case, I make a little notation because I want to relieve the rubber this way. If you pull this way, it's just going to chew this up on the way out. At a Partol, usually in a matter of, and I'll get Q-tips in the corner here, in a matter of, oh, maybe a minute or so. Put on something like a really nice surface. And again, the more important area, most important, is little areas in the back here. And all this little detailing, it seems like it doesn't pay off. When you pull that first part out and it looks real nice, then all this work seems worthwhile. And it's these little details, all these little hatches and scoops and everything that just make for an outstanding model, one that just sets itself apart from, you know, a sea or a crowd of otherwise ordinary planes, or planes that don't have any innovative features, any little detailing. How quick that shine on the primer comes up, even with just a little polishing. Next step, we're just going to build a box around this for the rubber mold. Okay, made up the little box. I'll mix and pour the molding rubber off camera, get this up to dry, and then we can work on some of the other detailing. Again, we're trying to spend this day doing a lot of detailing, the little details that make the model special. This type of mold, I've noticed in my learning curve here, one of the things that's real important is to get these little cavities filled before I pour the mold and get all the air out of them. Otherwise, these little cavities, when you take the mold apart, what happens? Of course, there's a bubble there. And then, of course, once we get all the low spots, we're just going to fill the mold with rubber and put this aside to dry, and we'll have plenty of other things to work on. Yeah, for anybody that's never been to New Jersey in the winter, it's like New England. It's the snow falls and everything looks nice and clean, and really is a pretty place. Now I just pour a little part of this until I see that I'm not going to have any trouble with an air bubble in there. See how these pieces won't uncover? And the air will rise to the top, but this just helps it a little bit. And the reason I'm saying this is this is a real easy little mold, like if you wanted to try one the first time, something like this with a landing gear leg mold, and it just ruins it when you have a big air bubble, right? And then you say, oh, see, there's an air bubble. That was an air bubble right there. That one's clean. That one's clean. That one's clean. This one had an air bubble. That one had an air bubble. See that big pocket of that probably would not have come to the surface. There's another one. You can see that. Anyway, to let these gas out before I pour the rest of the rubber. Give that 5 minutes or so. See the air? See the big bubble pouring out of this one? But that's the trick that I've learned that makes it, you get it right on the first shot. Okay, we can put this aside to dry, minimum of a day, preferably 2 days. The defining feature that I want to carve up the plug for the mold. The bottom scoop has something very similar, and the top, these are very similar to what they use in NASCAR right now, where it has a flute, it drops down, and is an inlet, and of course what I want to do is create a mold for this, so you could put this in your next Cardinal. Just have a drop-in piece, you cut a slot in the block. I can also use that same piece on the wood fuselage and on the carbon fuselage, and just save a lot of work once I have a mold. Once I carve up the piece, I'm hoping I'm going to be able to mold a piece. It'll go in the carbon fuselage, in the wood fuselage, and of course the last but not least, I can use it in the, or I can make two. Actually, I'll probably make two. So I can use one in the scoop for the bottom. So in effect, once I get this mold, it'll serve many purposes. I'm going to make two. The sad reality is, because this nose is much longer than a scale nose, we can't really put the scoop in the totally scale position. So again, this is making me have to interpolate here just about where I'd like to have this, and I'm assuming if I do it by percentage, it's a little forward of halfway between the cockpit and the spinner, which would lead me to believe maybe an inch in front of here would be the appropriate spot. First thing that I can think of is to make it symmetrical. I'll put a fold in the paper, make myself up what I assume will be something like, at least close to what we're looking at, and I'm looking at the drawing as I'm doing this. I need to make it a lot longer because this piece is going to go into the fuselage once I cut that out. Now, by making it on a folded piece, what happens, you have a good shot at making it symmetrical, but even this is not. I want to take this over to the model, of course, take a look at how close we are, and obviously just keep making patterns until I'm happy with the shape. NASCAR uses this. This is something they developed, I don't remember when, but I remember reading about how great the airflow is in these kind of little deals. Well, let's see, because we want it a little forward of that. Well, the only thing I don't like is I don't have this parallel. I want to make that parallel. I'll just make a new one up. See what I did? I didn't keep these lines parallel. I'll just make a new one up. This looks a little closer. Now, obviously, I got to leave this piece even longer than it has to be, because some of this is, in other words, from the side view, what's going to happen is this is going to taper down gradually and then turn into a flat. It's going to have a curve in there to be prototypical. President Prototypical Nixon. Over the years, I've developed a real scientific way of making little detailed parts, and they usually, well, more times than not, come out real nice. First, I make one that I know is too big. In this case, I know this is the one for the scoop on the bottom, but I know that that's on the big side. Now, I know the top one needs to be smaller, because when I look at a drawing, it's smaller in this dimension, but I don't know how much. So I'll make one from the real print. I'll just downsize it, until I get, now this one I even feel is a little on the big side. I'm going to trim about a 1/16 of an inch off of this one, and that'll probably do it. Listen to this. I go to here and somebody's here from UPS. Anyway, the other reason for molding this and not carving it out of a piece of wood is the finish on here and all around the edges would be extremely hard to get. You'd need little dowels and little sanding sticks, and you'd never get it even. Where if it's a molded piece, when I sink that into the top block, it'll already be pre-finished, and I can also adjust this up and down to get this part just right. So this will be, I think this is going to be a really nice way to do this kind of detailing. Also, if somebody has, a Cardinal, an SV11, and they want to put this cool scoop on the front, or in some cases I can picture you'd want to have this, like Dave Fitzgerald has this little scoop right up on the nose for cooling air. Well, because a carbon body is all hollow here, this will actually be let some air into the fuselage. And I notice big size, the bigger of the two, will be the prototypical inlet on the bottom of the cowl piece. The question of taking a piece of really scrap half-inch wood, tracing that on there. From the templates, I made tracings onto half-inch wood. I'll go cut this out on the Dremel saw, and I can start doing the shaping on this. I can start roughing these out to shape, and again, the shape kind of tapers down here in a very gradual way. Good tricks for getting these kind of curves where you don't want to have a notch, more or less. You want to have a smooth transition. I just use the sticky back sanding paper that's already on the roll, and it gives me a nice transition right in there for the side. Of course, this takes a curve down. I wanted to get the sides curved first. It's square where it enters the box. Again, a lot of modern motorcycles and sports cars have this shape. And I don't know the really truly, actually a lot of jet planes have it too. An F-16 has this. What am I talking about? Going to have a taper down and forward. Now getting this curve in is just a little bit easier thanks to the radius on the roll of the sticky back paper. You wind up getting a nice transition. We want to know a good way to be sure that you have this symmetrical. It's not crooked in any way. Lay a piece of tape on here and trim it off. Or a piece of paper even, and then just transpose it over to this side, which I've already done, and that looks like it looks pretty accurate. Anyway, that's kind of like that shape that's around the disc brake areas on the cars. This little scoop, I want to make sure I have all the edges on. There's several ways I can make this mold, and one of the ways I want to try is a little bit different than the normal way you would make this mold. So the first thing I want to do is take and harden this up, all the edges, and I think the easiest way to do that, I'm going to just laminate on a piece of 64th plywood right over the top. In fact, I can put 64th plywood along the edges. So I want to make it as hard as possible so I can get a nice finish on it. One reasonable choice here, see, I want to keep that curve. And again, I'm taking this 64th plywood, always has a smooth side and a rough side. I want the smooth side out, of course. I'll get some CA on that, and I'll laminate that in. That'll give me a nice hard edge in the final mold. There's a lot of different ways to make a mold. Now we could take, choice one would be, or one of the choices, just take this piece itself and use this for the mold, because this is going to be the opposite of the normal way we've been molding. But I don't really want to do that because I anticipate selling a lot of these parts, and I don't want to, if I destroy the mold or it deteriorates, I want to be able to recreate the mold itself over and over again. So what I'm going to try to do here is from this part, put a finish on it, make myself a rubber mold of this part, and then cast this piece, cast what I will use for the mold in gel coat. And what that'll allow me to do is if I find out later on I need a lot of these pieces, I can just redo the mold. I want to get this to attach as tight as possible, what I was trying to show before I started rambling on around. The way to just get rid of all this extra material, sometimes I would take a scissor on this. Notice the grain, by the way, goes side to side so I can keep that flow. But what happens, it tends to split the plywood, so I'll just take the sanding drum and grind this all away, and then I can laminate the sides also. Now that plywood, what it does, it gives you a nice hard edge to work off. And also, if you use the finished side of the plywood, the side that's very smooth, which I'm going to do on both sides here, what I'll have is a nice sharp edge to make my rubber mold from. And from the rubber mold, again, what I'm going to do is I can make multiples of this. So if I want to make 3 a day, 5 a day, or whatever, I just anticipate this might be a nice thing to even include right in a cardinal kit or something. You can picture a lot of uses for this. Kind of a nice scoop anyway. Once I hit this with glue, see, let that part, now I can just hit this with a drop or two of CA, go right around the whole edge. That'll give me all nice hard edges to work my mold off. Now what I like to do is trim one side before I laminate the other side. It just makes getting in with the Dremel tool a little bit easier. And I'll just repeat the same thing on the other side and the back, and I'll have all the edges hard. Whoop, why did I just drop it? Clumsy. Now this will give me some really good edges as I get this trimmed off. Now it's just a question of getting this all final sanded, get the other one final sanded, get a coat of thin CA on here so our finish doesn't sink in. See, the one side of the 64th plywood really has a nice, you can really develop a nice finish on it in a real hurry. Okay, we're ready to mount them to a base plate. Now what I'm going to try to do this time, rather than putting any finish at all on here, because this is so nice and smooth, it's all plywood, it's all sanded, I'm going to try to just wax this with part all wax and then build a box. Now what I want to do is from this, I want to create a rubber mold. Then from the rubber mold I want to pour this, which will actually be the mold, in gel coat. But if I wanted to, if I was only going to make 1 or 2 parts, I could put PVA on this and just use this as a way of laying up my part. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. What that'll allow me to do, the option I'll have then, is just to make as many of these as possible. I can make replications of this mold. Now again, I don't really need to go crazy putting a real super finish on this, because when I take the gel coat part out, I can buff it out and wax it. All I need this is to get a decent release. And anytime I can save time on one of these little parts, means I can put more time into some of the other things that really will show in the final model. And this one is a little bit different than most of the other ones we've done. We're going to lay this up on the outside so that the inside shows. The inside is going to be the part that shows. The next thing is to lay out and make the box in the standard way, and then pour the rubber mold. Tip on making a box: if you make the pieces of wood, say each one overlaps, you don't have to make any precision fit on it then. Just cut them all 1/8 of an inch oversize. It's a big time saver if you're going to make a lot of boxes. Well, the last thing of the day is to pour the molding rubber. Again, I want to pour this slow. Try to get in all little nooks and crannies. Don't want to just dump it in like whatever. And if all the good news is, I just, over supper tonight, I was listening to the radio, and we're having another 10 inches of snow tomorrow, so we may be home all week working on this stuff. Can't wait. I'm moving to Anaheim. That's all there is to it. Alright, that'll dry overnight. I'll go shovel some more snow, and we'll see you in the morning. Now when I pull this mold apart, remember I have that arrow on there for a reason. And most of the time you lose, or I lose, because I don't put a finish on it. If you pre-finish the box, it would be, you wouldn't have this problem. But I don't have to. Balsa wood is cheap. Sometimes it's easier if you just get a blade under the corner of the... Again, I don't look to reuse the boxes. Now remember, I had this, I want to pull it back, and I want to break it real nice and slow if I can, because I'd like to be able to use the plug over and over again. If I get a lot of call for these manifolds, I can make up, see, okay, we're going to get it off without a... Alright. Maybe we all learning something here as we go along. Right, now what that allows me to do now, I can use this piece, I can just make up another box, and next time I'm mixing mold and rubber, make up a twin to this. Now see, there is a little floor in there, but yeah. Little stuff like that I'm not even going to worry about. That's not going to matter. There's one bubble down there. Maybe that these have to be dressed off a little bit, but because I still have the plug, it'll allow me that choice of making this mold over and over again until I'm happy with it. We'll pour one of these up later this afternoon, tomorrow, and see what the final part looks like. And that off, that's ready to make another mold should we need 2 of these. I'll just keep that in storage. Now, one of the last little things we're going to be able to do before we end this video, I took the plug out, took off the PVA, and you can see it's made a good impression. But you see all the little imperfections and air bubbles along here. Now, one of the reasons when I called up the Smooth On Molding Rubber Company, they said this rubber really activates better at about a 72-degree temperature. My shop is about 60. I like it cool. So what I did, I have a little test going right now. What I did, I put up a little heat lamp to try to warm the rubber as I'm molding it, and get it just warmer in here, because I like to work when it's cold. I like to move around a lot, and apparently 60 degrees impedes, it makes the viscosity of the rubber too thick that you do trap a lot of air. So again, we'll see how this little mold comes out probably on the next tape. We got another little mold going over here. I let one of the exhausts, I tried a little test on it to see if it would lay up with gel coat. Another little test going over here to see if the heat is going to help. And a lot of times it's one little thing like this that'll just make you crazy. It'll just totally make you crazy. This mold, it won't matter at all because we're not going to use this edge at all. In fact, I'm just going to lay this up, fill this with gel coat, fill both sides with gel coat in fact, and lay a little cap of plywood on here. Because in essence, I'm just replicating this wood part, and then I'm going to be able to lay real lightweight cloth and structural resin on top of it. I don't want to use, in other words, I could really even use this, but what's going to happen is as time goes by, this is going to start to chunk, and then I don't have a backup. Now, no matter what happens to this piece, I can always create another rubber mold in a matter of a few minutes. So I have a good safety system for this. Next step is offline. I'll just mix up a little bit of gel coat. Again, these little things are going to be in the part of this that gets thrown away. You can see this is the part we're going to see, and that part of this is relatively nice anyway. This is the tooling resin that I've used in the past from Aerospace Composites, and it's a real good system for laying up a mold or a mold part similar to this. ETO1A. And whenever you use this material, the only thing you really want to use this for is to get an edge. You don't build a the part that's the structure. You don't use gel coat at all ever. So in this case, because we're going to be sanding and finishing this anyway, and this is to replicate a mold plug, we could just fill this up with whatever material's left over just to save money on resin. But normally that would be all you need in a mold. Or if you were going to make like a glider fuselage, a good example, a glider fuselage where you want to see the gel coat in the final part, with the purpose being you don't have to paint it. This is absolutely all you have to do is just paint the mold with gel coat, let it go to tack. In our case, we're not going to worry about it because there'll be no structure on this. And when this is done, all I'll need to do is just fill this cavity up with the other tooling resin that George supplies. And this tooling resin is really about the nicest of all of them to use. Once this dries, I'll fill the cavity with the other tooling resin and then make the cap for that. And we'll be finished with that plug for today. Finish up the core of this mold with 102B. This is 15 to 100 mixture by weight. Now we're going to put a piece of wood on top of this to act as a base plate, and we'll open this up tomorrow, and we should have two pieces ready to make these little scoops. And of course we always think we're going to have something. It's not a problem. It's all tooling resin. I want to make sure that this will tool right in. We'll see what that looks like tomorrow when it's all dry. Now see, pulling this apart, this is, I've marked which the front is. This is not, see, oops, I laid a little bit of carbon fiber in here. Sometimes it takes a little fiddling to get this complex of a part out of the mold. And I know this is the one I slit. I had to slit because there's air bubbles in it. Oops. Yep. Yeah, there is a flaw in this mold. And the flaw is I had to slit this because there's an air bubble right there. But it's not a big deal to make it over. It's certainly no big deal. This still, you could grind this off. You just can chip this out, in fact. and have something like a usable part. Now, the reality is, not every part comes out perfectly. Don't be disappointed if the first time you make a mold for a belt crank or whatever, you have flaws in the mold, see? And it's these flaws. Now, when I remake this, I'll be real careful not to. Right there is where the problem is. See the little, there was a bubble. And we knew there was a bubble in here. I just wanted to see how bad this was going to be in the final parts. So what I'll do is I'll mark this, put it in my box of molds that what the problem was. So that I don't inadvertently use it over and over again, and keep a spare part with it. And like I said, sometimes you got to make 2 or 3 copies of a mold before you get one to be up to the standard that you want. I always save these reject parts. The reason is there's always some young kids in the club that are making profiles or something and they want some free parts. I'm always glad to give them away. This could be sanded out, in fact, and used, but I want them to come out of the mold a little bit nicer than that. That's the little bubbles and flaws and things you have to deal with when you're making up a new part, a new mold for a new part. But that's certainly okay if you had a profile Mustang or something and you just wanted to have one of these. It seems like the kids in the club or the guys that, you know, not building world-class planes, they're happy to have these. So I always keep a little box, I dress them off and keep the extras. And by the way, another thing this could be used for, if you were going to make you wanted to make a modified one, say with shorter stubs or something, and you could use this as the core to make it up. We never give up, ever. Add this to our bag of little things. The next time we're going to be making exhaust manifolds. You never have too many little spare parts to grind on, and some spare molds to cut pieces out of, whatever we've had any bit of luck with. This is what ultimately will be our part for laying up the scoops. Actually, we could PVA this and lay up a test scoop today. Now, we don't care about this. This is not something that's important. What I care about is that this is all the shape I want. I can just peel this away. This is just gel coat anyway. Gel coat, get an idea in your mind. Gel coat has no strength. Gel coat goes along for the ride much the same as paint does. And these little bubbles, they won't be a problem in the final part either. I clean this up, trim it all up, and we'll be ready. Actually, we're going to lay up a part today. Want to clean up a couple of the little bubbles here, and I know these are not even going to be in the final part. Just make it easier to lay this up later. I'll take this over to the sink, clean it with some Brillo, polish it up a little bit with some Gorhams. This is where using one of the trowels with a little sandpaper, you get in all the edges, and because this is gel coat, it really sands literally like butter. Sands easy, has no strength. Think of it as spackle. Spackle for your mind. Usually it's the edges that are always a problem. I see I have a bubble here. I'm just going to fill that with CA before I lay this up. Flaws like that, I'm just building up one little coat of thick CA after another, let it kick. Block sanding out, and you can see I'm almost got it. Maybe one more coat. Candle it. Take a guess what the next step is. Yes, Gorhams, get a little polish on here. 4 coats of part all wax. We'll spray on some PVA and we'll be ready to lay this up, I guess, sometime later today. And we'll be able to actually get, we are coming up on the end of the tape, but we may try to get the parts on the end of this. Gel coat usually picks up a shine relatively nicely. Sands easily, but again, no strength. See, we won't care about any of this. All I'm concerned about is that area right there that we're going to see. And anything better than Old Gorham's for buffing Brodak dope or buffing molds out. This is really good stuff. Another good product if you're really serious about making a mold, you gotta have a can of this laying around. This is what puts the final wax coating on before the PVA. And this is the part that just does take a little bit of time. I like to get 4 coats on, about an hour between coats. Buff it off with the dry part of the towel real good until I get some kind of a relative gloss. I think you can see the little gloss there. 4 coats and then the PVA. It really does have a nice shine after the 4 coats of wax. Yeah, that's going to work pretty well, I think. Oh, I buy this by the gallons, but you can buy quarts. And again, you can brush this on or spray it on, either way. Usually 2 coats is enough. I like 4 for the first time on a mold. Now, thanks for joining us, and we're going to pick up the rest of this on the next molding tape. A lot of details being done here. I hope you've got some good ideas on stuff you can use for your own plane.